There isn't just one action that can stop COVID in its tracks, but taking personal measures and building healthy habits will help to protect us all. COVID-19 spreads in confined spaces, crowded places and close contact settings. Wash your hands regularly and practice good hand hygiene. Carry a face covering at all times and wear it in any crowded or busy places. Increase your distance when you can and seek out fresh air either by meeting outdoors or increasing ventilation indoors. These little personal steps will really help add up and protect not only you, but those around you. Lateral flow device kits are available free of charge to everyone in the Isle of Man. You can order them online at gov.im/COVID-19 or collect them from any participating pharmacy. It is recommended that everyone test every 3 to 4 days. In the last few weeks, almost 70% of positive PCR tests were identified thanks to an initial LFD test, making them a really important tool to uncover hidden cases of the virus. Vaccinations are effective in preventing severe illness, hospitalisation and even death. The vaccination programme is available to all island residents aged 16 and over and provides our greatest collective defence and ability to manage COVID-19 long term. It takes just 1 minute to register for the COVID-19 vaccination and it could save you from severe infection. Be safe, be smart, be kind for our island.
Hello and welcome to Election 2021 Question Time. In this edition, we feature the candidates looking to represent the constituency of Onchan. Joining me on the panel are, in alphabetical order, Rob Callister, James Cherry, Julie Edge, Michael Leather and Peter Willers. Following the general election on September the 23rd, 2 of them will be elected to the House of Keys. And before we start with questions, each candidate is given up to 2 minutes to introduce themselves. And we start off with Rob Callister. Rob.
Thank you, and good evening, Richard, and thank you for the kind invitation this evening. By way of a quick introduction, for those who don't know me, I'm Rob Callister. I'm aged 52 and married to Ellen. Over the last 9 years, it's been an enormous privilege to serve and to represent the constituency of Onchan, firstly as an Onchan District Commissioner for 4 years before being elected to the House of Keys in September 2016. Prior to my election, I worked within the island's finance sector for over 18 years. I'm a fellow with the Chartered Management Institute, a compliance professional and a trust estate practitioner. I also continue to hold professional memberships with the Chartered Management Institute and with the International Compliance Association. Over the last 5 years, I've worked in 5 government departments. I was also the chairman of the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee and a member of the Public Accounts Committee. I also was appointed the Island's Children's Champion in June 2020. As for the past, the present and the future, the Isle of Man responded incredibly well to COVID-19, and no one could have foreseen the uncertainty and the challenges that we've all faced over the last 2 years. As an MHK, it was a genuine privilege to support and help so many constituents, businesses and island residents through 3 extremely difficult and challenging periods in the island's history since March 2020. However, our focus now as an island and as the community must be on the future and repairing the economic and social damage caused by COVID-19. If re-elected on the 23rd of September, I will continue to be engaging, visible and approachable on behalf of constituents and continue to work for the very best of my ability on behalf of the constituency. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. James Cherry.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm James Cherry, the youngest candidate in the general election, not just in Onchan. I'm standing because I have a passion for politics, always have and always will do. Wherever I may be, I am proud to be a Manxman and always have been, going many places abroad and always singing the praises of the island. I think the island showed its brilliance during the COVID-19 pandemic, helping each other when we were in times of struggle, but now we're coming out of that and we now need to progress for the future. Where many things were left to the wayside with the pandemic, those things have come to the forefront, as we are seeing, and now need to be looked into with matter of urgency. Affordable housing is a massive issue that is coming up time and time again on the doorsteps. Young people leaving the island and not coming back, and even those in their mid-40s who can't afford a house and again are leaving the island to live elsewhere. This is something that we need to act on immediately and can't hold back any longer. We are now the 12th oldest nation in the world by age, and that's something that will cause an absolute nightmare with our healthcare system and many other systems. I want to set precedent for future, not just for 5 years, but for longer, much longer, and to set us out on a plan to progress and be prosperative in the future. I only make one promise: to do my utmost to the best of my ability for the people of Onchan. I will not promise this, that and the other, because it may not be possible with 24 MHKs and you have to try and persuade others as an independent. And I am not that naive to notice that it's not going to be easy as an independent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Julie Edge.
Thank you. I'm Julie Edge, a proud Manx woman who was honoured when the people of Onchan put their trust in me in 2016. Since being elected to serve the constituents of Onchan, I have been fully committed to scrutinising and challenging the decisions of government, holding them to account and striving for greater transparency and accountability. Our government must always make those decisions which are fair and which will work for the benefit of all our island residents. not the few. And this is something I will continue if successfully re-elected. I have delivered significantly on my 2016 election pledges to the people of Onchan and worked diligently in my departmental and committee roles, at all times ensuring transparency, accountability and fully considering important issues both nationally and locally. During my time working for the people of Onchan as their MHK, I have successfully changed policy and legislation. One example, the election legislation for the voter, in respect of candidates declaring any interests, associations, memberships or affiliations they may have as part of the nomination process. I have proved that I can deliver the changes that will help the people of the Isle of Man to trust their government. I have taken on the challenge of leading the Isle of Man Post Office in line with the will of Tynwald, working hard with the staff and board to put this exceptionally vital business on a sustainable footing for the future. I have returned this business back to profit in the latest accounts, and that will be presented to Tynwald in October 2021. This was ahead of the forecasted return. I have achieved where others have failed. With many more challenges ahead, I hope that the people of Onchan will put their trust again in me on 23rd of September 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Michael Leather.
My name is Michael Leather. I'm 74 years of age. My qualifications are I have a Bachelor of Science in Building Surveying, and I have a Master's degree in Commercial Property Development. I've been fortunate enough to see in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s how tourism affected the island, and since 1960, when Freddie Laker brought in the all-inclusive holidays, the decline of the tourism. With the decline of the tourism, it's affected the island in many ways, such as transport and the cost of getting on and off the island, and the few facilities for the destinations that we need to go to. With regards to the affordable housing, we need to look into this, because in England, many of these affordable housing supplies 40% of the houses that are built. And there's also a community infrastructure levy. Both of these need to be looked into, and I believe that I have the integrity and the qualifications to be able to sort that out. My proposal for the promenade is basically where the sea wall is crumbling and needs replacing, that we can do that into the scheme which I've done, and also with car parking can be addressed with the same scheme. We can also make it where an unusual situation where the cost will be financed, self-financing, apart from the initial outlay. Thank you, Michael. And finally, Peter Willers.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I grew up in England and qualified as a barrister following a law degree at Cambridge. I moved into, as a legal advisor, into commercial businesses, mainly involved in property construction and property development. And in 1986, I moved over here to the Isle of Man to take up a job in that business. During that time, or since that time, my family have moved here in some degree, and I now have 4 grandchildren living here, or 4 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. So I'm very keen, like you all are, to ensure that the economy grows, and that's the problem. We have to have a growing economy because, as we know, a rising tide floats all boats. We don't have a rising tide, none of those boats are floating. We need to make sure that there is affordable housing for all the people who need it. It needs to be by shared ownership or other ways. We need to deal with the planning problems which exist, because that is a major inhibitor on development and growth on the island. So far as pensions are concerned, they're going backwards, not forwards. We must change that. Financially deprived children must be able to get equal opportunities. Universities should be open to all who meet the standards, and more apprenticeships are required. With how hospital wards are closed, surgeries are short of doctors, waiting lists are long. We all know this. Patients go off island for treatment which could be given here. That needs changing. We need to make sure that the economy grows by regaining control of the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, panel, for your introductions. So on with the questions. Since 2016, the Manx public has seen demand for food banks grow, rising levels of homelessness, nearly 10% of households becoming fuel poor, and the Select Committee of Tynwald on Poverty state that income support and job seekers allowance are simply not enough to live on. Meanwhile, the Manx public has also seen its government deliver increased delays and costs in the millions of pounds for the likes of the Douglas Promenade, Liverpool Landing Stage projects, a 3-year period without water slides at the NSC, hundreds more staff and consultants on the public sector payroll, and also ensured that the Manx taxpayer also now sponsors an e-sports team. If elected, what will you do to improve accountability and ensure that the Manx public gets better value for money and a better standard of service from government? Julie Edge.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would, previously I had asked and requested for a structural review of government, which was carried out, but actually it was a grades review rather than structural review. I don't think Coman actually understood what a structural review was. I would certainly look at continuing with the motion that was delayed due to Tynwald members not actually voting to continue with the sitting, the last sitting in July, and that was to make sure that chief executive officers and senior directors of the department have to be accountable with performance-related pay. It was disappointing that that didn't go through. I would certainly continue with that, because I think unless we have the right levels of pay and we hold these people to account on what they deliver for the people of the Isle of Man, there's no point going anywhere. We need to have good governance. We need to be making sure there's scrutiny of the departments on their spend, and no one should ever be spending over their budget. And certainly many times when they come back to Tynwald for supplementary votes, I was not a supporter of them. I think the biggest challenge we have, having been a civil servant, is we have politicians elected that don't understand the structure of the civil service and how you can deliver change. I've certainly delivered change within Isle of Man Post Office with structural reviews and grading reviews, and obviously we're back in profit. I think the challenges for the next administration is we need the right leader. We need the leader that will make sure that the island is put back in a sustainable position following COVID. We need experienced politicians that have dealt with COVID, the biggest challenge that any administration has dealt with for years. And it will be down to that leader, getting a good team around him, a programme for government that will be costed and delivered. And I feel that the Council of Ministers needs a complete review and reform as well. However, I think the key will be that programme for government and the legislative programme going forward to make sure we can deliver what's required. With regards to the excessive bloat, as I would call it, in government, we need that challenged. We need politicians that can challenge that, and we need to make sure we've got efficient, effective services delivered on the ground.
Okay, thank you. James Cherry.
Yeah, I mean, it is well known that the government capital projects are renowned for going over budget, even looking like a disaster zone. Anyone who goes down the prom, even now, you look at it and even though it looks all right, the pink concrete is in about 50 different shades, so it looks a mess once you've finished. You know, where's this money going is essentially my question. You've had Oldham who are doing it, who are then subcontracting it to someone else to do work. And they're going off because they're going to other profitable jobs. It's where's the accountability to them to say, what are you doing? We're giving you this money and this is the deadline. You know, if you're in the private sector, you would put clauses in your agreements saying, if you miss this target, you're going to get docked, whatever we're going to pay you, or you're going to get fined, something like that. And it just doesn't happen. You know, we've had the Beamans report into the Department of Education and in the DOI, just showing up massive flaws. The Department of Education isn't honest with its own staff. I've had meetings with education members the past couple of weeks. Head teachers are having to reverse engineer the funding model because they don't know what the funding model is for their schools because the department won't tell them, you know. It's things like this where, you know, Julie's mentioned that management, chief executives are running somewhat riot where, yeah, you don't need to know that, you don't need to know that. Sorry, yes we do. You know, if you want a good, cohesive working government, you need to all work together, and it's not happening, and that is something that does need to happen. And I would go with Julie that we do need a full structural review of government across the board.
Thank you. Peter Willers, your view?
Well, I don't think you need a structural review of government. What you need is to get rid of the people at the top who caused all this to come about. Those people have taken on projects which they have no ability to control in any way. In the commercial world, they would have been fired long ago. Instead of that, they live in a cloud cuckoo land of where the money just keeps coming in because they keep asking for it. And it's taxpayers' money. No one really is accountable for any of that taxpayers' money that's spent. Over the years since I've been here, it's happened time and time again. It's just that we've had that happen so much more in the last 5 years, and we have all of the illustrations that you've listed. And that's because they do not know how to use their integrity. They have no integrity to be able to take advice from and get properly qualified, trained, knowledgeable people doing the jobs that they allocate to others who can't do it, and then they say, oh well, it's above their pay grade, or they were outgunned, or this or that, and they just make silly excuses. But they all stay there and carry on making the same mistakes again and again, and that's just not acceptable. It needs changing. It needs a root and branch change, and you can't do that in the system that we have here, where you have 24 MHKs, essentially creating 24 separate independent parties, which then all fall in tune and march to the order of the chief minister, whoever he might be. You end up with a chief minister's party, and nothing really happens, and the morass still carries on all the time, year after year after year. It really has got to change, and it's got to change from the top. The top civil servants need culling in every way. I don't believe that there are any of them fit for their job, and that's why we're in this state, and they need sorting out, and it's Tynwald who needs to sort them out, and Tynwald need to pull together rather than toe the line of one person. They need to pull together and actually use their common sense and apply themselves to get the civil service sorted out, reduce the civil service numbers, employ civil servants with knowledge and with the ability to know they can't do it, the staff they've got are not up to it. If they are up to it, then good. If they're not, they need to bring in people who are up to it. And that's the way it's got to go. Without that, nothing will ever change.
Thank you. Michael Leather.
With regards to government, we need the heads of departments to put their qualifications after their name and become responsible for their actions. We have too many of these so-called chief executives, but we do not know as to what qualifications and what the capacity they're capable of being able to do. If we can get that sorted, then there's a lot of hard-working people in government, but without getting the heads correct, it's not going to carry on being efficient. With regards to the hospital, I would suggest strongly that we have someone in charge as a facilities manager. The facilities manager can provide all sorts of things which most of them would not think of doing. With regards to people with food banks and requiring employment, we can have a situation where tourism can be brought back to the island. I have done a feasibility study, and I have put some of it into the manifesto to show this. On the promenade, regardless, the sea wall needs replacing. I'm showing a way where...
I think, just with respect, we're going to get on to growing the economy a little bit later. If we just stick to the question, which was about accountability of politicians and senior civil servants, how would you propose we make them more accountable?
Well, first of all, as I say, the first thing that we need is for them to present their qualifications after their name, because I don't think many of them have it. And yet they're in responsible positions. We need to see what they're capable of. Okay, thank you.
Rob Callister, your view?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I think there are some serious questions to ask about the budgeting process. I mean, I have sat in the Department of Infrastructure for the last year, and I've sat on the Promenade Scrutiny Committee for the last 3 years. And I've asked so many questions, probably thousands of questions, in order to, to make sure that the voice of the tourist sector, make sure the voice of business was actually heard. And as you actually know yourself, when the plans were first published, I had actually said in advance of that the Seaward side had to be done during the summer season to allow the tourist sector to actually not to be influenced or interfered with during the season. Obviously, we've had COVID since then. You know yourself that those plans, for some reason, when they were published, were completely the wrong way around. So it does, as MHKs, we do have to be robust. We do have to ask challenging questions. Getting the balance right, working with officers, is difficult at times, and I have had blows with officers over the last 5 years. I've been very fortunate you've actually sat in with some of our tourist meetings, so you know that how robust and how forthright I have been with regard to my views to make sure that decisions are actually challenged on a political level. However, I do believe that there is something fundamentally wrong with the government's budgeting process, how it assesses those budgets, how it actually comes to say that's how much that scheme will cost. That has to change. We have to be more accurate with that information to make sure that if we are doing the promenade, or if we're building a ferry terminal, or if we're building a new school, that we've actually got accurate costs which go into the public domain. I think more importantly, I want to just focus on those cliff edges. And I think all of us as elected members over the last 5 years, anyone who was involved with COVID-19 absolutely got so many phone calls from people facing cliff edges, suddenly not able to pay their rent, not able to pay their mortgage, not able to feed their children. It was so many. And that poverty report highlighted some of the social issues that we're going to have to address. Whoever is in the next government, they're going to have to address them as a matter of urgency. You're talking, something as simple as bringing in the living wage, looking at the benefit system, looking at what sort of vouchers or systems that we put in place, because there is something fundamentally wrong with our society at the moment, that too many people are facing cliff edges, and we've got to stop that.
Okay, thank you.
To add to what,
sorry, James.
Rob's just said, we have one of the most complicated benefit systems that I've ever seen. You go and try and get a form for job seekers and you feel like you're putting your whole bleeding life on the line. And the thing is, you'd be filling out, go for another benefit, you're filling the exact same information out apart from 2 bloody questions. It's different, that's it. Why are we still on paper and not going on to an automated system? Or going online, you have an account online or something like that. I know a lot of people who aren't online. That's fine, and I get that. You can still go into the office at Markwell House and you could do it there. But there is people who are online and efficiencies. There's another thing. The juggernaut of government is about as efficient as a 1970s car that hasn't been looked after in that 50-year period, And this is the problem. The living wage is something that should be the minimum wage, we shouldn't have a minimum wage of £8 on, because that is where people are having to go on food banks and benefits because they cannot afford to live. There's a reason it's called the living wage, because that's what you need to live over here.
Okay, thank you. I just want to move it on to another topic, if I may. Big theme in this election is housing, and particularly access to affordable housing. And local first-time buyers in particular are finding it increasingly difficult to get that foothold on the property ladder. At the same time, the government actively markets the lack of restrictions in the island to off-island investors of buying property. What actions would you propose to help local first-time buyers? And Rob Callister, if I can give that one to you first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. This is an interesting question. I think the first thing we've got to look at is the census when it's published in October. I think we need to understand, we know that the island's population decreased by 1.4% between 2011 and 2016. But when I actually did some research on this, between 2001 and 2016, we actually built 4,262 new houses on the island. But our population only increased by 6,333. So if you divide that by the capacity of a house, it's 2.1. Then in total, we only needed 2,700 houses. So the question is, on paper, we seem to have a surplus, but in reality, we don't. And we know that during COVID-19, there has been a breakup of the family unit. So that's something we've got to address. So I know there's enough evidence out there to turn around and say when we had 5 people living in a house, we may now have those 5 people living in 2 or 3 properties. That's something that's going to be addressed. But in respect of affordable housing, I've already said in my manifesto that we've got to change policy housing 5. And that relates to the 25% of affordable housing. That at the moment is too low given the circumstances. And that policy basically means if you build 8 units, 25% has got to be affordable or first-time buyer housing. I think that figure's got to be increased to at least 40%. I think government's going to have to step in and offer more financial support. I think the other thing we've got to do is actually build more social housing. We have invested, £77 million on social housing, but that is to replace current stock. And the local authorities have done a fantastic job. Unfortunately, now we need to build additional new estates of local authorities or first-time buyers' houses. We've got to give a range. There is something fundamentally wrong with our housing, but we don't know what that is until we get the population data, and then we can assess what the actual housing need is.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Michael Leather.
With regards to first-time buying, in the UK, it's a minimum of 30% if it's a brownfield site, and it's 40% if it's a greenfield site. Over here, it's 25%. So there is a large difference, as Rob has explained. With regards to the housing, I would like to see a breakdown, because I believe there's somewhere around about a handful of construction people have bought up most of the property that's for sale. Therefore, the land is maybe artificially high. If there's no land available, then obviously it does go higher. If the housing, again, if there's any restricted down to a small amount of houses, then the market value is increased. And I think that we need to look at this situation. If we can have more land, and if there's more builders, then the prices could come down.
Thank you. Julie Edge.
Thank you. Certainly with regards to housing, I was member responsible for housing within the Department of Infrastructure up until I resigned. At that point in time, we had houses within the percentage on the new development site in Colby that were available as affordable homes to first-time buyers. There was nobody on the list that came forward for 6 of those properties. So we had, well, I certainly wanted to look into an opportunity for people to be able to get onto the property market and perhaps move into the first-time buyers at that point in time. The difficulty that most people had was saving for the deposit. I've repeatedly gone to the Treasury Minister prior to the budget saying that we need to do an assisted deposit scheme for people to support them onto the property ladder. This wasn't taken up in the last administration. I would certainly push for that in the next administration. But the solution that I found in Colby with the property was to do a mid-rent scheme. And that was an affordable rent with white goods and carpets, etc. in the property. So the individuals then had the opportunity over a year, 2 years to save for the deposit, and that was successful. It was a pilot scheme. It needs to be extended into other areas, and many of the people that went into the mid-rent properties moved on to buy first-time buyers. We also changed the open market scheme, which many people didn't know about. So, you know, there are some properties in Douglas that you can buy for £170,000, £180,000, but they need work doing on them. And, you know, as long as they're mortgageable, that was an opportunity. Those schemes do need updating, as, you know, we've all got the challenges with property at the moment. The Cronkbourne Village was up for sale during my tenure. I went to the Minister and I said to him, buy Cronkbourne Village and offer them out as affordable homes to the many people. They could have been offering them homes out £55,000, £60,000. Fair enough, some of them needed a lot of work, but it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity lost, I feel, in the last administration, and the Minister wouldn't grasp that, and it would have been a starting point to try and help people onto the property ladder. With regards to other work that I've done, there's a GRB development initiative at the present time. That's in planning, and that is for affordable homes. And one of the stipulations I made when that scheme was getting developed was that it had to be affordable homes and that we needed to look at different construction methods. And the method that is widely used for sustainability is factory-built homes. I have got that scheme. It's happening. And the other instruction that I gave to the officers who I worked really closely with on it was we needed homes under £150,000 on the island to try and help our youngsters. That scheme is there. It's available in my office if anybody wants to come and have a look at it. We also need to look at ways of when people get into the first-time buyers market, they then need to upsize. And we also need to look at social housing. We have over 6,500 social houses on the island. There's a big estate getting built down in Castletown at the present time that will see additional. I was responsible for the Clathvane development. I started that project. It came in on budget. It's probably one of the only projects in this government that did. We got additional homes there. We got some silver standard homes, so they were sustainable for the future and adaptable. When an individual buys a first-time buyer, they usually need to upsize if they're buying the current ones that are available from the developers, because the developers actually, I don't feel, really want to do the affordable homes. They would prefer to sell that plot on. What government needs to do is use the brownfield sites. Government needs to invest. It needs to create properties of different tenures so that we can make them affordable. Government has that option and we need to do that.
Okay, thank you. Peter Willers?
The Isle of Man has plenty of land. There's no problem about land. The problem is the planning system. The planning system makes residential land very difficult to acquire because of the restrictions on it, and that all of that needs to change. The only way to reduce construction prices and house prices for first-time buyers and people who don't earn big money is to make much more land available, because then you get small builders buying up land and building. You don't need a lot of money you don't need a lot of money if you're going to build and sell. What you need a lot of money as a developer is if you're going to build and hold. And building land is a standard practice throughout the UK and in the Isle of Man, because planning is so restricted, it actually prevents people being able to get land or get land to build houses where they should be able to. And that will carry on until that is changed. And it won't change unless there is government control, government change to change the planning system. The planning system is the bugbear. But having changed it, then you can ensure that there will always be available land and always be available housing for people who do not earn a lot of money. And once you got that, until then, what of course can be done is you can have shared housing, you can have housing which has got restrictions on it that you can only sell them to local people. You can't sell them to people who are going to buy and not occupy. Local owner occupiers, that will also have it, but you mustn't stop people investing in housing as a landlord, because if you do that, then you say, well, the government should invest more money and do all of the letting of houses rather than have a private sector that does it. Private, you need a mixture of both, but you have to make it easy for people to get onto the housing ladder, and you do that by decontrolling the ability to build land on build housings.
Thank you. And finally, James Cherry.
Yeah, I mean, affordable housing is a massive one, as I said, that has come up time and time again on doorsteps. Me talking to friends, I only know of 2 friends out of many hundreds who I was at school with who actually own their own home now. And that's because they're in high worth net jobs because of the qualifications they've got. Many people, as I've said, are going off island. For the first time buyer schemes we have are really not fit for purpose, and government have said, oh, well, we're doing these changes and these changes. You're just moving the deck chairs on the Titanic, I'm afraid. That's all they're doing. And it's civil servants justifying their jobs. It's no
different than when I wanted to buy a property when I was younger, and you have to work hard. We had mortgage rates of 15% then. And you have to have lifestyle choices as well, and I think that's key to people being able to afford homes.
And I understand that, Julie, but you know, people of my age are wanting to be there for a long term. They're not wanting to be just there for 10 years and then move out again. A lot of people have, well, we want to make this a home. You know, if they do want to plan to have kids or anything like that, you know, where I am, in the flats I am, there's one come up across the car park from me. It's £169,000 for a 2-bed flat. You know, you can't afford that on the first-time buyer scheme if you're a single person or anything like that. You know, you take that money to Lancashire, it's only across the water. You could get a nice 3-bed house, off-road parking, loads of garden space, no problem at all. You know, and that again can come around with jobs. I mean, I still get spam emails about jobs, and there was a job that came up offering about 27,000, which is quite high for someone of about mid-20s over here, from what I feel. And you could easily afford that.
We'll come on to the economy later. At this point, are there any questions from the audience?
Just listening to all the comments relating to first-time buyer houses and affordable property, government charge for mineral rights. So the raw materials for properties are, in the main, coming from the mineral source. Government charge for connection to all of the utilities, electricity and sewage, and they charge quite heavily. They also charge for conveyancing. So please don't put all of this down on the fat cat builders. The situation that we're in was government made. We restricted the island's population by restricting the building land. And that effectively played into the hands of 1 or 2 builders. That's a situation of government's making. I really want to hear how you're going to get out of that situation. Everybody's pointing out what they'd like to do, but it's almost like watching a beauty contest. You stood up there and you're saying, I want to bring about world peace and I want to feed all the children. I want to know how you're going to do it.
Okay.
If you get in.
Thank you, sir. So the specific question at the end there. Anybody want to take that on, Rob Callister?
As I say, I think changing policy 5 is right. I think you're absolutely right. Government does provide a number of these materials. Government's got to actually, the first thing is, as I've said, is we've got to get the census. We know of the from 2011 to 2016, the population fell. We need to know what the population is now in 2021. And from that, we need to base. You're absolutely right as well. We've got to attract, as James has rightfully said, every 2 students that leave this island, only 1 returns, and that has got to change. And one of the biggest problems the government's got to address is not climate change, not housing. The first thing the next government's got to address is our working population. That has fallen by 2,500 in the last 5 years. That is something we've got to focus our attention. But it's a chicken and egg situation, because we need to create the environment to attract them, but we need them here first in order to make those changes that we need. You're absolutely right. We've got to put the housing in there, because as James rightfully said, a brand new teacher qualifying in university, looking to come back to home where family and friends all are, and suddenly are faced with £1,100 rent for a 2-bed apartment, or you're facing a £300,000 purchase of a property. They're going to stay in the UK for a few years, where they can buy their first home at around £150,000, £200,000 and settle there, and then come back to the island later on. We've got to change that culture. We need our students back home again.
Rob,
Thank you.
You need more students. The island is devoid of a natural resource. Our natural resource has to be created. Intelligent working population could be our natural resource.
But we have got another problem as well, which ties into all of this. Everything seems to interlock with something else.
Yes.
The Isle of Man is naturally declining.
But Rob, my son's just been through university, and several of his friends didn't go because they couldn't fund it, and they didn't.
Agreed. I absolutely agree on that. We've got to have this. We've got to have well-paid jobs here. We've got to bring in lifelong children. That's right. But there is a problem with our birth rate. In 2010, the Isle of Man on average was having 1,000 births. In 2020, that's fallen down to 660. We are absolutely naturally declining population. The number of deaths on the island is increasing as well. There is so many problems the next government's got to start with, but they've got to tackle them in the next 5 years. As Julie said, it starts with the leader, it starts with the minister, it starts with all MHKs, and all 24 MHKs in the next administration must roll up their sleeves, and it's up to the public to hold them to account.
Well, I agree with that, Rob, but you're talking about a diminishing population. The population of the planet is increasing at an alarming rate. So why are we out of step with the planet?
But not in the Western world and not in Europe, unfortunately.
We're out of step, Brian, because of the previous administrations that have put us in this mess. The last 5 years, we've tried to make changes, but there's such significant changes of errors in legislation. Landlord legislation, I've got to bring that up because that is causing a housing crisis at the present time. We've got people who are selling their properties, so therefore the rental prices are going up. All of these things have been created
I was on the
by
Landlords
successive governments.
The proposed bill caused so many landlords to back out of being in that property.
Exactly.
You have a situation where you penalise landlords, threaten them with 2 years imprisonment, £50,000 fine.
Okay, can we just? Okay. This is going off in various directions. I'm conscious we're on limited time, and we have a lot of issues which the people watching in the audience tonight and on the screening will want to cover. So, final word to Michael, please, on this.
A thing which I find with regards to a successful island is social, economic and environmental issues. Regarding the social, if people come back and they've got a family, while they're working, what do the family do? Where do they go? What form of entertainment do they have?
Thank you.
What facilities do they have?
Sorry, Peter, yes?
That's a big issue.
On the land supply. The problem that you face is that in the UK, the land cost of property is much lower than the land cost on the Isle of Man. And that's because there is a lack of land, and that's because of the planning system. That would all change if you opened up the planning system to allow residential housing to get planning much more easily, or even without planning. If you've got land and it's got services near it and that sort of thing, that's all that you really need. You need water and electricity to construct a house.
In the island
that's what you've got to have.
But we've got to stop the developers land banking. They've land banked, and that's what's creating our
But you
problems.
can't stop developers from land banking because it's past events. What you can do is make it not in their interest to do it by opening up the supply of land from other landowners. And it would be there as soon as you change the law.
Right.
And the law needs changing.
Okay, thank you. There's a gentleman with the green shirt at the back has a question. Thank you.
And my question is really aimed at the two MHKs. You talk a lot about affordable housing, but I'm I turned 30 this year. I work in financial services. £250,000 for a decent house isn't affordable to me. I'm sorry, you talk about bringing back young people to the island. 9 out of 10 of my university friends never came back. It's too expensive to live here. You pay £1,000 in rent to a landlord for a flat. We understand that they have to make some money as well as maintaining the flat. But the simple matter is, what's coming up in the market is unaffordable. It's just plain and simple. I'm one out of about 100 of my friends who actually has managed to get a foothold on the ladder. If I manage to buy this year, no chance. The government needs to step in and do something to regulate the market. Otherwise, this declining birth rate is just going to continue. It's not going to change because simply there's no opportunity here to live or build a life. I'm sorry, Julie, you mentioned something about lifestyle. I work 37 hours a week in financial services. You know, I spend the weekend with my family. That's not a lifestyle choice. That's just life. I don't understand what you mean by lifestyle choice in terms of affording more.
That's down to personal choices and to what you actually do with the money that you earn. But with regards to what you're saying, with regards to house prices, they've been rising. We need to regulate the market, but we need to regulate it in the right ways. And it's the developers that are creating some of the surge at the present time in the pricing. And that's where I said before, brownfield sites, government needs to develop, and we need to do a different type of tenure.
I think it's a great question. I think this may be a legacy issue, and I know I talked earlier about there may be a surplus of housing on paper, but in reality that's not the case. But if between 2011 and 2016 only 164 new houses were actually built on the island, that is a startling fact. So it could be a legacy. There's also the COVID, what's happening with COVID. I bought my first house in my 30s, so I sympathise with anyone who's desperately trying to get on there. Accessible for all. There is something which a lot of jurisdictions are talking about, and I've mentioned this in my manifesto. It's called housing first, because what we do need to make sure is that everybody has access to housing, because we can't sort out a lot of addictions and mental health problems and other problems that we're facing unless we sort out housing first. And one of the priorities of the next government is that policy around housing first, and then addressed everything else.
Thank you. James Cherry.
I mean, what you're saying about it going up exponentially is exactly right. I mean, I was with a small business owner this afternoon. I've known him for years. He used to be one of my teachers. He's now got his own business. And he's had a split from a partner. They bought a house, and it's gone up £100,000 in 3 years. You know, it's a 3-bed bungalow in Glenvine, and it's gone up by that amount. That is not affordable increase. You know, wages haven't gone off that much. Someone under the age of 25, it's a 10 times their normal salaries. You're probably wearing nearly 8 if you, for anyone else, and that was in the paper recently. We had a estate agent on yesterday saying we don't have enough homes under the price bracket of 400,000. £400,000 is still a hell of a lot of money if you're of my age and of your age. It's not working. We are going to end up in a catastrophic situation if we do not sort out attracting young people, not just to come back, but to actually work here. We are going to end up having to, and I'm sorry, you're going to end up paying 40 and 50% taxes in the next years if we do not sort our backsides out right now.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have a final word on housing?
I think we also need to look at the banks and the way they're what their services and what they're offering to people. How many people can afford a 40% deposit? So government does have a role to work with the financial institutions to make sure that people can get on a foot on the ladder. Government could do rent-to-buy schemes. There's many options available.
Yeah. I mean, an interesting development, sorry to jump in, is, you know, we've seen this in COVID-19. I worked in an office at the first lockdown before I moved job. You know, a lot of businesses are actually looking at shrinking their office sizes. So we've got a lot of office space now that's going to end up probably sitting dormant in different places. Why don't we get schemes up and running to turn these office spaces into flats that maybe first-time buyers or something like that? It's a start, or even social housing, whatever. Convert them. And I know it's right in the centre of town, it may be convenient for people.
Peter?
What happens is, just following on Julie's point about banks, the government is quite able to provide mortgage facilities. It should provide mortgage facilities. It should do it on various bases, one of which could be shared ownership, and that sort of thing. So there is plenty of ability to do things like that, but it's still got to be, at the end of the day, affordable. And if it's not affordable, the government is not going to be in a position to do it, because all they're doing is pushing the market up, and you can't push the market up. If developers know that there is a ready supply of cash, the market will go up, the price will go up, because that's what they're in business for. They're in business to make a profit. And there's no reason why they shouldn't be. That's okay, but it's still got to work from a social point of view. And that's why you need this change in the planning. It needs changing, and it will bring it to a halt immediately.
Thank you. Rob Callister?
Yeah, just a small point. I think Peter was right. The amount of constituents that I've spoke to over the last few weeks who mentioned about them buying their first property through a government mortgage. So maybe government should look again at mortgages or deposits or some support to get people on there. But we need the property, we need the chain to work correctly, from social housing to first-time buyers, you know, to open up the market, to allow people to buy their first, second and third house. But it's something that government has to address as a matter of urgency in the next administration. OK, thank you. We really do need to move on, because we are running short on time, and we've only covered the two topics so far. Staying on, if you like, attracting people to the island, creation of jobs. One popular bullet point on candidates' literature is growing the economy, the desire to grow the economy. So it's easy to say, but it's hard to achieve. What is your big idea to grow jobs, to grow the economy, to grow wealth for the benefit of everyone in the island? Michael Leather.
Well, the first thing we need to look at is what the maximum amount of residents that we require. Because at the moment, quite a lot of roads are congested and they're never going to improve.
Are we full? Would you?
Sorry?
What's your idea of the ideal population in the Isle of Man, in terms of numbers?
What's the maximum?
Yeah, what do you feel is the maximum population?
Well, I would think that we'd have to have a ceiling of a maximum of about 100,000.
And in terms of sectors for the island, you're very passionate about seeing tourism grow. What ideas do you have to see that sector grow in the island?
Well, the ideas I have are in my manifesto, where I would like to see the promenade be built, the extension out to reclaimed land, which would then provide several facilities. One would provide brand new hotels, plots of land for new hotel systems.
We have hotels closing down.
I'm sorry?
But we have hotels closing down, Michael, because they aren't getting the custom.
Are these hotels or glorified guest houses you're talking about?
Either or. People can still, that's still accommodation for tourism.
How many modern hotels do we have?
Yeah, but if this is where government could be facilitating grants or something like that if they need to do.
I'll make it easier for you. How many modern hotels do we have in Douglas?
We've got the Premier Inn that's just been opened. Developments like that.
That'll support a lot of people, won't it?
The GDP for tourism is quite low.
As I was saying,
to what we need.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Carry on, please.
As I was saying, at the front, the extension I have goes along the promenade by 1 kilometre, and we can put probably 10 new hotels on that facility. We provide also the sea wall, and we can also provide two levels on it. The lower level will be for all the car parking we need. The next level above would be a brand new shopping precinct with all sorts of facilities such as...
But we have empty shopping units in the street, Michael. They're empty. You know, we've just had Topshop closed down. There's a massive shopping unit, but nothing's going to replace it.
The customers can't get there.
Well, at the moment they can't. No, at the moment I know they are, but you know, that is another review.
You've got a little narrow street where a lot of people in 2012-13, when the cruise ships came, the people off the cruise ship were in that town asking where is the shopping precinct, and they couldn't believe that was it. You have to wake up and you have to be catapulted in the 21st century,
James,
which you obviously are not.
James, do you share Michael's ambitious vision for tourism, or is there another direction that you would see?
I'm sorry, but it's an absolute pie-in-the-sky idea. Where are you going to get the billions of pounds to get it? I've seen your manifesto, Michael, and you said private enterprise. Have you not just realised we've gone through a pandemic where businesses are still struggling for money? They're not going to pay for it. They're struggling as it is. This is why you've had the likes of Topshop and many other businesses going bust because of financial constraints on the general consumer, the general person. It's just absolutely...
So where do you see growth in the economy occurring, James?
We need to diversify our economy. At the moment, we're too reliant on the finance sector.
Well, the DFE promotes the fact that we have over 20 active economic sectors in the Isle of Man.
And that is a good thing, but at the moment, from what I can see, we're over-reliant on the finance sector, then I'd say IT, and then somewhat engineering. Yes, we may have over different 20 sectors, but they're small. We need to help them grow. We need initiatives and facilitate their growth. That's what we need to do and make it a much more appeasing place to come to live. But this is all linked
to facilitate growth. We've had Sparks Impact, which failed us at £50 million. It's not been successful. What we actually need to do, personally, I think we need to stop all capital spend unless it's already started, and we need to completely review that and focus it on what we need to attract people to the island. I would not move to the Isle of Man at the present time with the current waiting lists for health services. Would you want to open up a company here if your staff could not get health care? And there's many things that we need to look at very closely, but there are emerging markets that we could be focusing on. I think we should be looking to grow the biomed sectors on the island. We need to look at green technologies. We need to look at one of the big emerging markets that's going to come forward is car batteries. The island needs to focus, but what we need to do, instead of investing our money in people to come here and providing that funding to them, government needs to make, in the programme for government, some strategic decisions and say, we'll provide factory buildings, etc., whatever is required to build that market, and then the people will come. With the present system as it is, we hand the money out and then they move away after 2 or 3 years. We've got to focus it back and do some of the basics so that people will then be attracted to the island. We've got the 0-10 and the corporate tax base coming. Yeah. Exactly, that's the policy that's going to... We need to look at that very closely. This administration needs to be focusing on that, focusing on the KPMG report that's coming out, and we need to make sure that we start delivering things that will attract people back to the island. We've done it successfully in the past.
Linking back to what Julie said, about, and I said it before, is you're on about people, companies then leaving the island. I said it before, where you get fined or something like that. It's kind of like, well, if you leave the island in a certain amount of time or ever, you say, well, we like either a percentage or we like our money back.
They do that currently, but
it needs to be done more harshly. You know?
And, you know, a lot of people blame the work permit system for the economy. It's not the work permits that's causing the problem. It's having fast-moving people that can help support any business that wants to move to the Isle of Man. And I'm sure from your previous experience, Richard, you will know that the over-bureaucratic process gets in the way, and we haven't got the right officers dealing with attracting that business and economic growth to the island.
Okay, thank you. Peter Willers, if we take zero tax out of the equation, what do we have?
Well,
what can the island offer?
what we have to do is to just construct an environment which makes people in business want to come here. It's a great place to live. It's a great place for their staff. Always remember, the island supported 600,000 people, tourists, during the tourist industry, every year. To say that the island population should be restricted is just plain, just not practical. You look at Jersey, less than a quarter the size, 120,000 people there. You go to Jersey, it's a lovely place. It doesn't affect being in Jersey. The same thing needs to be done here. We need to positively encourage immigration. Immigration will bring people with abilities, with money, and be able to help to grow the economy. We need to get rid of, and Julie mentioned this as not being an inhibition. I can tell you it really is. We need to get rid of completely the work permit legislation. It is pointless. It always has been pointless, and it is. You know, if you're going to move a business, excuse me. If you're going to move a business here, you don't want to have to follow that sort of thing. You're moving to a controlled society, and a controlled societies never work unless you're like China. If we become like China, that might be different. But you know, you need to get rid of that, and you need to encourage people to come and live here who are able to add to the community and add to the economy. And they will do that if you have the right environment. And the right environment means getting rid of all those sorts of controls. And it'll bring up the housing. There'll be housing here for high value, low value people because low income people, because they'll need to house their staff. You increase the population, and that will bring up the economy. You've got to allow that to happen.
Thank you. Rob Callister, I know that tourism has been very close to your heart.
Yeah, I mean,
I've
worked with the tourist sector for the last 5 years. I mean, we were bringing in 308,000 visitors to the island. The industry did see increases year on year, and it was going in the right direction. But to go back to what we should be doing, I think absolutely right. We should be looking at planning. We should be working with businesses to remove some of the red tape, actually work with the regulator to remove some of the regulations, to actually make sure that we are attractive to new business to come here, to start here. We need to make sure that our businesses are aligned with our schools, to make sure that people in school are getting the right skills to support business in the future. And all of that, I think, and regardless of what people may think, I'm absolutely a massive supporter of the work permit system. I really do believe in protecting, you know, jobs for Manx workers, but we've got to make sure the Manx worker has the right skills and the right approach for the new businesses coming to the island. I think diversifying our sectors is absolutely key to this. But again, I think it goes to the heart of this is planning, regulation, and working side by side with businesses, listening to them and actually trying to remove some of the barriers in order for them to flourish and to make the island an attractive place for new business to arrive.
Thank you. Any more from the panel on that particular point? Well, thank you. That wraps up our questions for this evening. All that remains now is for each candidate to have their final word on why they should get your vote. And we start with Peter Willers.
The reason you should vote for me is that I am not afraid of saying what I think. I'm not afraid of taking difficult matters on. I've always been successful in all of my endeavours. From my childhood, I've always been able to achieve what I was looking to do. When I went to college, I was married. I had 2 children, and I then was working during the 6 months of the year I wasn't at college, and I've worked hard all my life with people who've been in private business, and they've all made significant sums of money, and I've helped them along the way. And I can do that for the Isle of Man as well, because you can't grow an economy without enterprise, and you can't have enterprise if you have inhibitions on it. And we have so many here. Most businesses, a lot of businesses are here, were here just simply because of the tax. You can't grow an economy wholly on tax. Tax is changing worldwide. You can't rely on that. You can't really rely on any of the transient aspects of the economy. You have to build a proper business structure for proper businesses earning money in the traditional way.
Thank you, Peter. Julie Edge.
Thank you. I will continue to work hard for Onchan, its people, and carry on working collaboratively with the commissioners, police and many of the businesses in our community. I'll also continue to strive for the development of a new primary school, and also to ensure that our infrastructure, roads, pavements are fit for purpose for everybody's use. Edge for public interest, not self-interest, is my mantra as an MHK. For the people of Onchan, I have been tenacious since being elected in holding the government ministers, their departments, statutory boards to account. As well as being chair of committees, I have consistently challenged and delivered. The most important thing for me is that people know that I'll truly work for them to explore their concerns, to fight their corner, and to consistently challenge and scrutinise. I want to see efficient, effective services delivered to all the people of the island. As a person of my word, I want to reassure the people of Onchan and the wider island that I'll continue to deliver the required change with the experience that I have gained in this administration and throughout my career, with the public interest as my primary motivator. If you want change and you want that voice in the House of Keys, please vote for Julie Edge on the 23rd of September. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. James Cherry.
On the 23rd of September, you have the chance to vote for 2 MHKs. I feel as though you should vote for me, James Cherry, because I'm one for new ideas to innovate and get our island going forwards for the future. The COVID-19 pandemic, as I said, has been and hopefully coming to an end. This is a time to innovate and regenerate and move forward for a longer, prosperous and better future for our island. This needs young, fresh blood, I feel, in the Keys to get this moving forward. I've always been outspoken when required and stood up for what I feel is right, not just for myself, but for those who I represent. I'm not afraid to challenge, but I'm there when I have challenged to say I will work with people to get where we need to go, even if it is not going to be fully what I want, but work for middle ground, but still striving for the betterment of the people, not just of Onchan, but of the island, and it's something that we need to drastically do. There is a big picture out there, and there's a lot of holes and problems with it, and we need to get that sorted out and fixed for a good, solid, stable future. So vote for James Cherry on the 23rd of September.
Thank you, James. Rob Callister.
Thank you, Richard. In 2016, I stood for the House of Keys, not really understanding exactly how difficult the next 5 years will be. I'm standing today as a candidate in this election with the full understanding of how difficult the next 5 years are going to be for the next administration. We've got so many problems. We've highlighted some of them tonight relating to population, housing, the economy, our health service, climate change. The list and the agenda for the next administration is massive. It does need people who are strong in character, people that will actually work with the community, work with government, but make sure that those decisions are evidence-based and explain to the Manx public. I've been open, honest and transparent all the way through my tender, right the way back to 2012. And I will continue to do that if I'm elected on the 23rd of September. Please vote for Rob Callister on the 23rd of September. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Michael Leather.
We have a big problem which hasn't really been addressed, and that is with facilities for getting on and off the island. At the moment, someone coming over to the island, a boat with two people and bringing their car, is £280. If we brought that down to £140 return, it would bring the people over, and it would also probably fill the boat. It would also provide accommodation for the people that come, and they would also spend quite a lot of money. With the VAT and the tax from that, the government would benefit rather than trying to hold prices up so high. My scheme is one for tourism, which would provide jobs. It would also youths up in Onchan walking around aimlessly looking for things to do. They would probably more than likely go down there and would give them some form of entertainment. All I'm trying to say is that we need a second income rather than just finance, and the second income would provide a social environment, also an income. So please consider what I'm trying to tell you. As far as Mr. Cherry is concerned, if he was there left to steer a ship, the boat wouldn't even get in the water. Thank you.
Thank you again to the candidates for attending and giving us their views tonight. They are Michael Leather, Rob Callister, James Cherry, Julie Edge and Peter Willers. Now it's over to you. Where will your votes be going on September the 23rd? Thank you for watching. Goodbye.